I ask everybody to put themselves on mute, except for our speaker here, Martha. And let me just take you guys through a little bit of an introduction. We're very fortunate tonight to have Dr. Martha Monroe, who's been a professor of environmental education and the associate director of the UF IFAS School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geomatic Sciences. Dr. Monroe has been responsible for extension activities, research and teaching courses related to environmental education, conservation behavior, and human dimensions of environmental issues. Her work includes the development and evaluation of curriculum resources for educators that help students develop understanding, systems thinking skills, and efficacy for solving environmental problems. She works to understand how people perceive issues such as climate change and designs programs to build capacity to discuss issues, acknowledging various perspectives. Her UF extension programs include 4-H for youth and teacher programs for PLT, Project Learning Tree, as well as the deliberative dialogue program, Civic. These programs help extension agents deliver resources to enhance youth development, such as nature poetry contests and community action projects for the environment, and to build community capacity for addressing challenging issues. Prior to joining the school in 1997, she directed the Resource Center for GreenCom, International Environmental Education and Communications Project, coordinated the development of the EE Toolbox for the National Consortium for Environmental Education and Training, taught in the College of Natural Resources at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, and developed award-winning youth programs at the Dahlem Environmental Education Center in Michigan. She was the president of the North American Association for Environmental Education from 2006 to 2007, and continues to work with colleagues around the world to promote high-quality environmental education programs, evaluation, and research. Martha is dedicated to using environmental education to help move individuals and communities toward pro-environmental and sustainable decisions. Martha, well, welcome. We're so thrilled that you're here with us today. And so you're going to turn it over to you for some overview of some of these new looks at climate justice and action by NAAEE.
Thank you very much, Scott. That's quite the introduction. And it's delightful to be here. Thank you for making this all happen and bringing us together. Thank you all for joining this evening and listening again if you're checking out the recording. I'm just going to share my screen and get started because I don't think I have more than 20 minutes worth of something to say. So there'll be plenty of time for us to chat more if we want to, or just do something else. I'm assuming this works and you're seeing the nearly done front slide. Great, good. Okay, so the nearly done is an important caveat. This document is right now at the designer phase, and so we don't yet have a PDF to share, but it will be posted on the website for NAAEE sometime this summer. It's just really, really close. And what we're talking about tonight is the newest set of guidelines in a series called Guidelines for Excellence. This particular one is called Educating for Climate Action and Justice. So we'll back up just a second to introduce NAAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education. It's a professional organization. The members are environmental educators, most of them in the United States, then also some in Canada and Mexico because it's North American. But there's actually members in 30 countries around the world. NAAEE has affiliate organizations. So there's a state EE association called LEAF. Colorado has one. David, you're in Georgia. Georgia has one. So all of these affiliate organizations are also associated with NAAEE. And together, That's some 20,000 environmental educators. So there's a lot of people behind this. And it's not just teachers. It's non-formal education in museums and zoos and nature centers. It's agency educators in parks and forests and whatnot at the national, state, county level. It's people in business, it's people in industry, it's anybody who might care about the education we're providing to learners. Learners can be youth, learners can be adults. So it's a broad swath of who out there does environmental education. Their mission statement has two main components: strengthening the field and increasing visibility and efficacy. And I just named a couple of things from their website that are some of their ongoing programs and activities. This EE Pro is worth paying attention to because you don't have to be a member to sign up. Just go to their website, NAAE.org, and at the top under programs, you'll see EE Pro. You can sign up to be part of any of the 16 different online groups they have, from early childhood to climate change to non-formal to research and evaluation, lots of different things. They have an annual conference. At this point, I think the decision is every other year it's in person, the other year it's online. And that brings together 1,500 to 2,000 environmental educators. The next one will be October, this coming October in Pittsburgh, face-to-face. So if you've not been to one, it might be worth checking out. You can at least go to their website and find out who's speaking and what's going on. There's training programs, there's initiatives, there's awards programs. But one of the things that they do that we're talking about tonight is their Guidelines for Excellence series. This started back in the 80s, I think, as a response to the backlash against environmental education. And we said, wait a minute, this is what good environmental education is. These are the materials, these are guidelines for developing materials or for figuring out if you're looking at an excellent material, how we teach teachers, what we should be teaching youth, how we design non-formal programs, how we develop community engagement, and how we think about early childhood. These are funded by the US EPA Office of Environmental Education, and some of them have funding from other organizations as well. They go through a long process to create them, which I'll say in just a minute. But these are the existing ones, and you can see that they're mostly around processes. They're things that environmental educators do in their work. They develop programs, they teach teachers, they engage the community. So this one on climate change is the first time we've tried to delve into something that's not a process, something that is content. And it was new and different for us. All of these are developed by a team of people, and they get feedback from the community over and over again. So there are hundreds of people who submit comments. I think Bora counted over 1,000 different comments for one of the ones that was most recently developed. It's usually takes about 3 years to go through this process of editing and fixing and changing and sending it out again. And so it's not any one person that sits down to write these things. It's really a team effort that involves the entire community. And what happens as a result of developing it is that we really sort of hunker down and think about, wait a minute, what's typical, but what's excellent? How do we move the bar and move the whole profession up a little bit? And then once they're published, there's an opportunity for people to sit down with them and say, hey, is this what we're doing? Is this what we should be doing? Does this match what we want to do? How do we do it better? And so it's really building the profession. They all are formatted around this list of things at the very bottom. There are key characteristics, 5, 6, 7, not very many of them. Each key characteristic has guidelines. Each guideline has indicators, and those come with examples of what this looks like in the real world. There's usually resources and definitions and for more information, go here. So it's a resource. It's a lot of information glued together. All right, so EPA with the new administration that came in 3 years ago said, climate change, we need NAAE to tell us what climate change looks like when it's education. So the first step was to develop a committee of advisors, and these are the people who were on that committee, most of whom you may not recognize. Ellen is from the state of Washington. Billy Spitzer was at the New England Aquarium, I believe. So there are some people that have been doing this work for a long time. Then there's some agency people and lots of folks. Then they started doing some interviews of people who've been publishing and doing climate change education for a while. And so a broad collection of not just teachers or youth education, but lots of different things. And then formed a writing team. This is the writing team for the climate education guidelines. It's led by Bora Simmons. She's been leading the development process for all of these guidelines. So she should get a gold star. This is a lengthy and involved and detailed process. Sheila was involved in the early childhood guidelines. Kathy Yoon was also involved in some of them, I think maybe the non-formal. Jen is at the Wild Center in New York in the Adirondacks. They have developed a really highly successful youth leadership program on climate change. They bring kids together in the summer and send them out to do great things. So you'll see there's a combination of climate educators, but also there are folks working in justice education. And so a real mix, trying to hit all the areas that we're trying to cover. And of course, climate change and climate change education could take lots of different angles. It can focus on climate science. It can focus on the problems and the causes and who we want to point fingers at and blame. This is why we're in this mess. It could look at solutions and what is being done or what could be done. And it could look at processes of how we go about creating a new world that respects and understands climate change. So these were some of the questions that we asked the advisory board and in the interviews to sort of give us a framework, give us some shape, put some, not boundaries, but start to define what it is we're talking about. So when the writing team first came together, they had that information to start with. And so we started off by saying, we're talking about using education as a tool for addressing climate change. And that means not only the historic changes, but the future changes, changes that we need to implement as a response to climate change. So we're really looking at a future viewpoint more than we're looking at past. We also decided in the beginning we were aiming for a broad range of educators using education as a tool for addressing climate change. So we're not just talking about teachers. We're not just talking about youth. We're including church groups that may have a group of adults sitting together saying, we should do something about climate change. We should understand it, and we should do something in this community. And so keeping all those different possible educators in mind was really hard. And so the guidelines do not say third graders should learn this and high school teachers should do that, but rather educators should be moving their learners to these kinds of capacities and capabilities and interests and knowledge. So it may not be as specific as what you're looking for, but I think it gives you a framework for saying, oh, that doesn't help me, but this really does. And then you focus on the pieces that you want. So there are several main pillars that we are looking at. One is looking to the future, looking for solutions. I don't think there's anything in the guidelines that suggest why climate change is happening. We're looking at solutions. And we're looking at we're imagining that educators are going to work with learners to take action. And so the action that would be most easy to do something about and perhaps most successful is likely to be local. So local solutions, local people, local resources, local actions. But that's part of the solutions. And getting an understanding of what can happen local means find out what other people had been doing. So it's not that they're limited to only local. They can also be looking at what's happening around the world. And action. Both of these two, a focus on action and a focus on solutions, helps move us out of the doom and gloom scenario that can be the source of so much climate anxiety and concern. We don't want to paint rosy pictures, but we also don't want to make people feel like there's nothing they can do. The hopeless and helpless response is not useful either. So images of what people have done, images of what people could do, and practicing some kind of action doesn't have to be a big thing, doesn't have to be a march on City Hall. And in fact, some of this is inspired by the Fridays for the Planet and School Strikes for Climate. Youth have been doing some amazing things around the world, and recognizing that and that it's time to help educators help more youth take action or any kind of learner is part of what we're talking about. And then there's the justice piece. Oftentimes people talk about climate justice as a function of understanding that the impacts to climate change are not going to be felt universally and uniformly around the world. Some people are going to bear a bigger brunt than others. That's a piece of it. But another piece of it is, as we think about solutions and adaptations and changes that we want to implement in our community, those too are going to be felt more by some people than others. And not only is that awareness important, but the engagement of all those people in defining and selecting and prioritizing community climate actions would be really, really important. And so helping youth understand some of those elements and how to move in that direction is part of what the guidelines are suggesting. That doesn't mean that you can't have a project of tree planting. So not every project has to have a justice component, but which trees and where the trees go and who's involved in making these decisions might have a justice component. And so it can be all woven together. Yes, climate justice. I think I just said that. Actually, we've been finding that in some areas, I think, well, I don't want to make any generalizations about us, but many people come to climate change education from the climate science realm. And we can't assume that that's going to be the hook that attracts everybody, because some people begin by saying, well, that's just not fair. And we should do something about it for those vulnerable, whatever they are, if they're pikas on the mountaintop, or if they're people on the coast, or people in a hot urban area that doesn't have a lot of tree cover. It's the moral and ethical element of the problem that engages some people more than the science. So neither one is the whole story, and either one can be the starting point. So we don't want to ignore the fact that some people will be attracted to climate action because of the opportunity for affecting justice. So let me stop there for just a second to see if anybody has a question. That's the beginning. That's the orientation. And now I'm going to talk about what are the key characteristics that we've identified. Does anybody have a question?
I have a question. This is Rhonda. Thank you for that.
Sure.
I'm sorry, did I just jump in? I'm using my phone because my computer is weird, so I can't see everybody else.
You're fine, Rhonda. Go ahead.
So one of the things that keeps people away from thinking about climate or even opposing climate as an issue that they need to deal with is just fear and the enormity of it all. So does the program consider easing people into it and minding the fear they may have, and those things that repel people from it ordinarily?
So that's a great point, and I agree, that's often a reaction to it. It's not exactly a program. It's more like it's guidelines. It's suggestions for what educators could be doing. And the suggestion that we have in response to your point is to pay attention to systems and to scale things appropriately. So if people are thinking about global climate, that's like the biggest system we can imagine. And we need to be thinking about solutions at that level. That's not what most learners are going to be able to start with. And so if we downscale in the system to an action that is something people can think about, like, let's put signs on the produce in the grocery store so we know where this stuff is coming from. So if people choose to buy local food, they actually know that it's coming from their state versus Peru. Like, I just saw asparagus is for sale in our grocery stores from Peru. So that means the solution is a small step forward, and we need to also downscale the problem to be something that that solution addresses. So jumping back and forth in the scale of the systems is one way I think people could begin to say, yes, this is only a small step, but it is a small step, and it's helping our community make some decisions about the production of, burning fossil fuels to move food around, and it's one way we can begin to make a change. And that little change, if everybody makes a little change, is going to add up to a bigger change. But individuals don't solve the global climate problem. Individuals solve community problems. And so we need to keep that in mind, I think.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll continue. And if you do have Robert, you took your
Yes.
your mute off. Go ahead.
All right. It's partly a fact, and it's kind of an enlightenment you've given me and where I'm coming from. I like this approach. It's the first time I'm kind of viewing it this way, more local, less global. So first of all, I want to tell you, I'm finding that enlightening. And it's my first experience. We'll be teaching it, the environmental science course this summer. True and true, a science educator. That's the approach I'm coming from. My biggest problem in bringing the two together, when we look at what's happened since COVID, we see that science education has an abysmal record. People do not understand the process of science. They do not buy into it, if you want, and see it as a problem-solving method. And I've been trying to rectify that. I like this step. It's probably more than a question. I'm just saying as a comment, I like it. I like what you presented. It's kind of giving me a different view on that picture of the environment. And from my perspective as the strict science educator, pulling it together. So not quite a question, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Well, great. Thank you. And you remind me that I should have also said earlier, we started this process just as NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they're the place where there's a climate education office at the federal government. They developed climate literacy guidelines, oh golly, 15 years ago, maybe longer. And they have been they started revising their guidelines at the same time we started creating these. And so we didn't step on their toes. We didn't say this is what educators should be teaching about climate science. We said, we're going to give them climate science. That's what they do. That's what they know. We're going to look at some other elements, but recognize that climate science is part of that foundation. So you might want to go to the NOAA website and look for their new climate literacy guidelines. And if you don't find them, let me know. Well, actually, I'll work with Scott and we'll start posting some links to things. They might not be available yet, but they're coming. And so I'm writing that down, because I think they'll really help you. I haven't seen them yet, of course, but they could help. Okay, so these key characteristics. We were brainstorming everything we know about good, effective climate change education, and a whole bunch of stuff relates to how the educator approaches the learners, the atmosphere they create, the strategies they use. And so we grouped all those things together under the first characteristic: collaborative, welcome, responsive learning environments. And then we said we need a foundation that has to do with what people know. So knowledge and skills to foster climate action. That includes understanding climate change, globally, locally, everything, but also thinking about action. And then we said, it's not just a cognitive foundation. We also need the affective. So we said attention on climate emotions. This is where we can talk about preventing anxiety. We can talk about building constructive hope. We can look at efficacy, because the combination of efficacy and hope starts to create some more, yes, we can do it feeling. And so that's important. And then we focused on action with locally focused, community driven, and civic engagement for climate action. And, I think, oh wait, I do. I can find the chat. I am sending a 2-page handout that lists these 5 characteristics along with the guidelines. And so each guideline is sort of explains what we mean by that characteristic. So under knowledge and skills, build awareness. Now remember, some of these educators are early childhood and some of them are university. And so we're trying to give it something to everybody. And I don't think any one educator is going to say that all of these are appropriate, but we want every educator to find something that's appropriate. So understand climate processes and systems. That's where we send them to NOAA. And then not just the climate process in earth science that has no people involved, but also understand human systems. So even economics and culture and how that relates. Systems thinking, action strategies, personal responsibility. And then here's the rest. I already mentioned the emotions piece. The locally focused and community driven means that some of these, we kind of imagined a variety of starting points. It could be that 5th graders want to plant trees and they'll do it locally, and that's fine. But by the time those kids get to be sophomores and juniors and seniors in high school, maybe they want to have a voice in their local government and say, we care about climate change, and we think this whole community needs to rethink their pedestrian and bus transportation systems, because we all can't be driving cars as often as we do, or something like that. And they might not just want to say it out loud. They might want to collect some data, stand on the street corner, count how many people pass with one person in the car, or, they'll come up with things. So know the community and build partnerships and think about doing that. But the reason we said community driven is that when they start interacting at the community level, we want them to access community resources. And sometimes it's appropriate to go out on a limb and say something that nobody else has ever said. But sometimes it might be more successful if you work with other people who are saying similar things. And so start to work with the community and teach people they don't have to do it by themselves. There's lots of folks out there who care about similar things. And then finally, if it's appropriate and if they choose, a civic engagement action activity where they're doing, planning a strategy and taking action and celebrating that they accomplished something. So each one of these guidelines, each thing that has a square, then has indicators. And under those indicators, it really tells you, oh, now I see what this is all about. Now I can imagine what this would look like in my classroom or in my group of learners or in my, in my exhibit where I'm talking about this stuff. And so this is what you probably really want, and this is what's going to be available this summer, because this is the piece that is at the designer. So each one of these things just took a lot of wordsmithing and a lot of back and forth. Is this what we're saying? Is something else what we're saying? So that's where the meat and the guts really are, and that's the piece I don't have to share with you. But I did paste some things out of the last draft, and there's a bunch of slides that I wasn't gonna, if you have a question, we can see if there's something on the screen that I can share with you. So that's what's coming. Oops. I mentioned there's a lot of other stuff in the document that will be useful. So there's, whenever we come up with a term, we try to send people to another page or a box where it's defined and there's resources and they can figure out, oh, that's what that means. So there's a bunch of did you know boxes. There are also case study boxes where there's a real live educator or a real live program that's available that has done stuff, and this is how it worked. So people can see, oh, well, that makes sense. Now I understand what that's talking about. And there are also resources so that if people say, yeah, but I don't know how to do that, they can go to a website, find a guide, find a resource that's out there. We probably don't name every climate change education document that exists, but an awful lot of them we do. And once you get into some of these loops and pages and digging in, you'll find more. And so they're available. So we're really writing it for lots of different folks. For the educators, of course, what should I be covering and am I doing it and where are the resources I could find? Researchers could use this also to think about what kinds of proposals they're writing and what they're doing. Are they measuring the right things that will give us directions of where we should go in the future? But of course, it's program developers and evaluators who can use it too for outcomes and objectives and resources, assessment, etc. Lots of stuff. To get this, when it comes out, go to NAAEE.org, and at the top banner of their welcome page, there's going to be a programs toggle, whatever, button, whatever it's called. And if you go to programs, you'll get a bunch of options. Climate change education is one of them, and then you'll get things like this. There's the EE Pro group of climate change. There's resources, there's climate justice. Oh, we've got two of those, the EE Pro. EE Works is another story, but they've got the climate change education piece too. And there's also some policy research that NAAEE has done. One of their programs is also Guidelines for Excellence, and you click on that button, you'll get the 6 that you can download that I showed you before, and ultimately number 7. I'm assuming they'll put the number 7 also on the climate change education page, so you ought to be able to get there in 2 ways. But in case they don't, and I don't know which one they'll put it on, I'm just telling you, try both. That is supposed to work when it comes around. I don't know yet, but that's available. If you have questions, you're welcome to contact me, and that email works. And Boris Simmons, I mentioned in the beginning, is the guru who has organized all this. She's got the answers that I don't have. And so feel free to also contact her. Let me stop there and see if people have questions. And great, you're also, thank you for adding things, David. And Megan, I was thinking if you wanted to add something about scientists in the classroom for Robert's question, that would be great too.
Sure. So at the University of Florida, we have the Scientists in Every Florida Schools program, which I will drop into the chat. And we pair teachers with scientists that do research, and it is very bottom up. So the teachers come to us, say, we want somebody who works in climate change, and then we connect you with our scientists who do work, and it can be standards-based, it can be a role model visit. We can work with them to help develop some sort of activities for your students to do, and this is free for public K-12 schools in Florida. And so I will drop that into the chat, and we have been thinking a lot about civic engagement and ways that we can help support climate change-based standards in Florida. So if you go to last month's recording, we shared some work on how we can help support that, as well as Martha was also speaking a little bit about community action projects, and we have a whole curriculum to help educators engage folks in civic action for the environment that is based off of the Earth Force model. So I talked about both of those in my presentation last month. So the recording is there, but I will drop the link for both of those in the chat. Oh, thank you, Martha. Got
I just did CAPE. Other comments or questions? Oh, David, you're on mute.
Patty, would you be willing to talk a little bit about what's going on in Colorado, because I think it intersects with what has been talked about so far. Oh, you're on mute too, just like me.
You know, we are just getting started with a third act Colorado group. So we are pretty new. The connection that I have to this group, third act educators, and then to you folks, is through Tiff Boyd, who's doing the Classrooms for Climate Action. And she started here in Louisville, Colorado, which is right next to Boulder. So I've been listening in and trying to cooperate and send people who are interested in environmental education from our Third Act Colorado group, connect them with the educators group. But we're very new. I can't say that we've done anything of our own. We're just trying to refer people over and kind of network. This is an area of really great interest to me, and so I'm learning and trying to get some connections. So that's why I'm sitting in on this meeting.
Yeah, and maybe for the people who don't know what Third Act is, it's a national group of people in their third act, that is, people over 60, third act of life. The group is a national group founded by Bill McKibben, and has thousands and thousands of members, and focuses on two issues: climate change and preserving democracy. There are many working groups, and I'm very involved with the educators working group, including a project team with Patty and Ann, who's down here, focusing on K-12 education. And of course, that's why we're so interested and welcome all the information you provided us with so far. But one of our main projects has been in Colorado with Tiff Boyd, who has founded a group, and I'll put this in the chat when I have a chance, called Classrooms for Climate Action. And it's so similar to what you're describing. And so I hope that this conversation might lead to some cross fertilization and new avenues for both ways. And I can, we're having a meeting actually on Thursday of our group, and I certainly will mention this. And Scott is going to be involved with that meeting too. So we've already got an avenue for making some connections between what we're doing and what you're doing. But TIF's project is really impressive. It's not as maybe as structured as what your framework looks like, but it focuses on local issues and very much connects with the issues of justice in the classroom. And one of her great, most impressive successes is she had a third grader testify to the legislator in Colorado, which contributed to passing the climate law. So she's doing some really remarkable and impressive and inspirational things in her project that I think overlaps considerably with what the information that you've given us tonight. I do have a question though. One of the things that inhibit me and I think some others getting involved, we're trying to scale up TIF's efforts in our local areas, is knowing, and I guess I should be embarrassed to say that I'm not fully aware of the environmental climate issues in my own town, other than the general ones that we all have. And earlier you mentioned that there were state affiliates, and I think you said Georgia, where I live. Is it possible that some of those state affiliates could help teachers identify local environmental issues, climate issues that might connect with their communities and be the focus of instruction?
It is possible. If you go to NAAE's website, you can find the link to the local affiliate that would, Georgia's, West Virginia's. I'm not sure Alabama has one right now, but you'd find them all. I would also suggest other people in the community, because who knows who you'll reach at the state affiliate. It still might not be somebody at the local level who could help you. So the county extension office could have somebody who would say, hey, we know about climate issues and environmental issues. The local nature center, the local Sierra Club, the local the Native Plant Society, the local environmental, the city environment office, whoever that is. There's gobs of people who know these things at the local level, and Eileen has some answers for you, I bet.
SEA, which is your Southeastern Environmental Education Alliance, made up of several states here in the Southeast, developed a landscape analysis, which lists a lot of what's available state by state by state. So go to your local affiliate and ask, or go to SEA, which is SEEA, and look for landscape analysis. And that's a great resource for people to have to see climate change and other issues. Plus all your projects, PLT, wet, wild, and all that are doing climate education and have frequently connected with a lot of people there. So those are resources for you.
Eileen, thank you. Do you have handy a link to that Southeast organization?
I don't, but I can send something.
Or just put the name in the chat, and of course I can.
Martha already did it. Southeast Environmental Education Alliance.
Perfect.
And so did
Thank
Megan.
What a team! What a team effort we have here.
Their conference next year is in Kentucky.
Okay.
So if you ever wanted to go there, I think it's in Kentucky in that. Or maybe it's Tennessee.
You.
I'm sorry. It's one of those, it's either Kentucky or Tennessee. I may be off.
Martha, here's a question for you, and we can, I just have it because nobody has their hand up right this second, but please, if people have some other questions and things, I'm just going to ask this. This will roll out, as you mentioned, during maybe June. It'll be out there. how do you envision people using this? Or, we've got a range of educators on this call, and informal, formal educators, and they get a hold of this. What do they do at that point?
So it could be lots of different things. I was involved with Megan in the development of CAPE, that Community Action Projects for the Environment. If this had been there 3 years ago, we would have used it as a framework. We would have said, okay, this is our goal. This is excellence. How much of what we are going to do can we match? It's a set of suggestions for designing a program. It's the sort of thing that it may not help Robert in the classroom as much as Robert in a group of educators in his school district or school district, I could imagine. They would sit down and say, okay, we know that we want to prepare our youth to be active, involved citizens and to solve future problems, things that we don't know about today, but are going to be part of their future. Here's a set of suggestions for how we might be doing that. How much of this match what we're already doing? Where can we scaffold it so that kids, when they're younger, start learning some of these things so that when they're older, it's not so much that they have to swallow all at once? How can we ease people into this notion of being engaged citizens? And what does that look like in our community? And so it's a bunch of ideas of how that might look. And you can see from the case studies and the resources, it's a bunch of directions of, maybe there's some answers here, maybe there's some answers there. So in my mind, that's how I imagine it. And I also think that if people are writing proposals to develop programs, to expand programs, to do research, they could use it. They could say, hey, these are the guidelines for excellence. I want to make sure I'm helping people move in that direction. So therefore, this program needs to be funded, or this research question needs to be answered.
Right. I'll ask Shakira. I'm seeing for the first time, actually, we were introduced virtually as well. She's over at Broward College, and I'm wondering, Shakira, at the college level, does what Martha's showing us, is that something that you're okay with, or that I'm not sure actually what you're teaching over there, but is it environmental education class?
Yes, so Robert and I are teaching environmental science, and it was interested to hear the earth science, because I'm a geologist, that's my background. So the non-human component really is been my focus, because that's what I'm comfortable with, looking at just the physical processes of climate change, of environmental issues. But this concept of environmental justice and the human sentiment, the feeling of righting or wrong, really has come home to me through the students, listening to their questions, listening to, their passion per se. And I've slowly started to focus more on that human impact of behavior, what we're doing as individuals. And just last week, through a student club, I helped host a clothing swap, looking at the impact of the textile industry on the environment, and kind of linking that to, like we talked about, distribution, transportation, the production of these items, which have this fast turnover, and kind of looking at so many different components of it. But I'm happy to I feel reinforced with this, kind of, what can we do individually at a local level? So like Robert, I'm a scientist and I bring the numbers and the graphs and the science, and the students really, for me, want to know, okay, we see all these numbers and they're, over my head. What does it mean for me? What can I do? And so I have been making a switch, slow, but making that transition so that they can feel that they have a role, that they can actually do something, and champion the cause, not at the global scale, which is far beyond us, but just in our homes. And I tell them, you start at your home, it goes to your neighbor, it goes to your neighborhood, and then to your wider community. So yes, the short answer to your question is yes. What I'm seeing here definitely, plays into what we're doing. And guidelines, I think, always help. But for me, I really am trying to make that balance between the physical and, raw science data, and the component where we can make a change, we can do something. So this has been really helpful, and I've clicked on every link in the chat. I have like 10 windows open right now, and I'm going to look at when we're finished. But yes, absolutely amazing for me. Thank you.
That's great to hear, Shakira. I'm in the midst of typing you a chat because what you've said really echoes what OECD has been doing as they've been rethinking science education internationally. This is the Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development. They're the ones that run PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment. And if you ever read those New York Times articles that said United States scores 18 out of 35 developed countries in science education, that's PISA. And I'm trying to find the link, but I will. Let me just send this part.
Okay, thank you.
I can't do that. Yeah, I'll find it. Thanks.
Martha, can I put a little plug in? LEAF is going to be holding a mini conference on October 26th. And so much of what I hear on these webinars and stuff would make great presentations. It's going to be in Vero Beach at the Environmental Learning Center. And I will be shortly sending out the request for presenters. So I hope some of you who live in Florida would think about possibly coming and presenting. And Martha, I'd love to have stuff on the guidelines for excellence there at LEAF. I think that's an important resource that some of the newer non-formals don't know about and aren't using.
Yeah. If you could send me a link to the date and the what's going on, I mean, that sure.
Okay.
I'll work
Vicki and I are doing the mini conference. We're also doing one in spring at Austin Carey in March, which may be a little bit easier for you in your backyard.
Yep, that would be. Megan can come too.
Yeah, and Eileen, we have a new Environmental Leaders Network in our institute for undergraduate students. So if you want to recruit students to the Austin Carey Forest, we can help recruit UF students for that.
Oh, absolutely. We'd love to have that.
I'd like to speak up. Am I on here?
Go ahead, Ann.
Yes.
Yeah. For David, since he didn't tout entirely what the project is that we're working on together. And it's an idea that retired teachers have a role to play in this environmental education, that classroom teachers have a hard time keeping up with just teaching and all of the requirements. And an untapped resource is to educate the teachers that are retired and let them come and co-teach with the classroom teacher. And that's a great resource. And as a well-retired teacher, I know that there's so much talent sitting around afterward, and maybe a quarter of people want to continue with that work. And so I thought that's a very brilliant idea that Tiffany came up with.
Thank you, Ann. That's great.
Yeah, thank you, Ann. We'll have to make sure with David's help that everybody knows about the NAAEE guidelines here, right? So that they can have access to those as well. Any last questions? We're kind of winding up our hour here, and I want to make sure I show you little bit what's in store next time. Any final questions from anybody? All
No
right.
questions,
It's
but thanks, Chris.
Rhonda.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Rhonda.
Yeah, I was just curious on the climate justice front, if it would be of any interest or inspiration to hear from the youth climate plaintiffs. My daughter is one of them for the state of Florida. And not only was it empowering, but it was also a reality check on what you can possibly do within our kind of skewed and corrupt judicial system. But it was without having to know all the technical details about what's going on, the youth were empowered to understand what their rights are and fight for their constitutional right under the state constitution. And there's a case going on to support under the federal constitution, and it's all youth, and it's exciting.
It's
So
great.
it's really, it really is. I mean, the current state administration has made it difficult. And there's a bill that actually just hit our Florida governor's desk today that is going to completely eviscerate a lot of the good that they did, which is really a shame. But these are lessons also that they need to learn. And the difference between the youth and us in many ways is that they don't have a vote yet. They recognize they don't have a vote. So what can they do? Well, they have legal rights under their constitution, under the laws, even if they don't have a vote. And that's where they decided to, flex their muscles.
Yeah, thanks, Rhonda. It's a good question. I suppose, Martha, my related to that is there an exemplar in the standards that are developing, a case study or something about the legal avenues that Rhonda was talking about?
I don't know if that is included. But it could always be that the website will contain more than the actual document does. So there could be more links added on. And certainly that EE Pro group on climate change could be a great resource as well, of asking questions, getting answers, having lists of potential resources. So there's just a lot out there.
Okay. Well, great. Well, Martha, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and discussion, and the interaction we've had with our audience here has been great. So really appreciate you being able to participate here. We got lots of flying fish. Is that monarchs or Megan or fish? I couldn't see what that was.
That's a monarch.
Oh, okay, very good. They're migrating right now. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to just 1 minute. I'm going to see if I can. I forgot to do this before. Let's see if I can find a presentation for the screen here. And I'm going to show the second one here. And invite everybody next month. We're going to have May 28th, save the date. This is actually going to be Rachel Wellman and out of FAU and I visited. We had at the Youth Climate Summit here in Broward County a few months back. We did a presentation on about climate and getting input from the students at the conference. And we want to share some results from that and ask you what you think of that. And as a lesson plan, is that something that some of you might want to incorporate in your own classrooms, and what kinds of questions you might ask your own students about the best way to do climate education with them might be. So I'm going to stop sharing that now. And again, thank you very much, everybody. And appreciate you joining us this evening. We'll send a follow-up email. I'm going to save this recording and we'll give you provide a link for this, and also some of the chat room materials here, so you can follow up with anything there that you want, and hope to see you again, and perhaps encourage you to join Florida FCEN if you can. And I'm sure we'll get some information I can pass around from David on third act as well, to encourage people to join that for the educators group. So thanks to everybody. And